What up, Wizards? It's Dev. Got some new cards for you again. I know, it's like my favorite thing to do nowadays, apparently. If you've been paying attention, you know that we just got the Avatar The Last Airbender preview panel last week. A lot of cool cards in that batch, and I kind of like the way they're going with the set aesthetically and design-wise. It doesn't look too bad, but what you could have missed is the fact that Wizards just casually, quietly released like 100+ new cards from different Avatar sets. We got to see some from Avatar The Last Airbender Eternal, and some from Avatar The Last Airbender Jumpstart, and while none of these cards are going to end up being standard legal, big poo-poo, it kind of sucks, but still, a lot of them do look cool for other formats. So today, we're not going to look through all 100+ new cards. What we're actually going to do is, like usual, I've gone ahead and picked all the cards that I think look the coolest from this thing, and we're going to check those out today. Now, heads up, we're going to look at a total of like 15 or 16 cards today, and the first 7 entries are going to be the kind of, okay, this is at least worth mentioning sort of stuff. And then the last 7 or so entries are going to be the things that I think are actually really, really cool. So let's go ahead and get started with Purple Pentapus here. A nice little guy, just a single black mana for a 1/1 octopus starfish from the Eternal set. When he enters, surveil 1. You can pay 2 and a black and tap an untapped creature you control to return this guy from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So it's like one of them skeleton guys, sanitarium skeleton, reassembling skeleton. There's a bunch of different creatures like this, but they're like all skeletons for the most part. This dude is not, and the cool difference here is that you get an enter the battlefield trigger on this. Like, it's just surveil 1. Not that big of a deal, but when you're getting it a few times over a few turn cycles, it becomes a much larger deal, especially if you're trying to fill your graveyard. So I don't think this guy is like too flashy or amazing. There's a reason I'm starting the video on it, but I still think it's a cool card. I mean, come on, octopus starfish, that's a great creature type mix. I don't even know this reference. I don't watch a whole lot of Avatar, but it's just a cute little guy. I make room on my list for cute little guys. But next we'll move on to a couple of guys that I think are kind of similar. And although one of them's intro packy, it's at least a rare. Let's take a look at Fire Nation Archers and Vindictive Warden here. Now, Fire Nation Archers is 4 whole mana, 3 and a red for a 3/4 human archer with reach. And if you pay 5 mana, it deals 2 damage to each opponent, and you get a 2/2 red soldier creature token. I might as well go ahead and read Vindictive Warden to you as well, because again, it's kind of similar. This is 3 mana, 2 and a Rakdos hybrid. For a 2/3 human soldier with menace, it has Firebending 1, and you can pay 3 mana, and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So you don't get the 2/2. And you don't get to do 2 damage, right? But you do get to activate the ability for a lot less mana. And with the Firebending 1, it helps itself activate the ability. The only reason I really bring either of these 2 dudes up is because infinite mana combos exist. And if you want a way to blow your opponent away, you've got redundancy with the other ways like this that already exist. There's plenty of creatures with activated abilities that'll hurt opponents. It's not like it's the first time we've seen it, but it's nice to see these for completely colorless mana so that if you do just have like Ashnod's Altar infinite combos, now you can win the game. So just nice to have, again, that kind of redundancy. Now, I'm kind of trying to zip through these first few entries so we can get to the good stuff, but there is still a lot of stuff down here that I really like Momo, Rambunctious Rascal, my pick for the most cubable card in this whole video. But either way, this is 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 1/1 legendary lemur bat ally, and when it enters the battlefield, it has flying, by the way. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 4 damage to a tapped creature that an opponent controls. So that's not bad. Little like flying Necrotal kind of guy. Like, I just love creatures that come down and blow up another creature, especially when they're like relatively cheap to play relative to stuff like, again, Necrotal or Ravenous Chupacabra. Often these things cost 4, even 5 mana to get down, but 3 mana is a really good cost, and it will probably find a target most of the time. I don't think you end up playing this in Commander, but again, in formats like Cube, where you get to like control your own draft environment, this looks pretty slick. But I guess my other pick for most cubable card of the batch is probably Lion Vulture here. So it's 4 mana, 3 and a black for a 2/2 cat bird. That's a pretty sick little creature type line there too. It has flying, and at the beginning of your end step, if an opponent lost life this turn, this gets a +1/+1 counter, and you draw a card. So it definitely goes in Cat Cube. Been talking about Cat Cube for 3 years. I swear I'm putting it together. We'll eventually do the video, but one way or the other, this is actually really sick in just about any cube environment, and it might, I think, have a case in Commander, but only in your really budget deck, your very low bracket with all your friends just kind of having fun with cards cards that cost 25 cents, because I'm pretty sure you're going to be able to get this for really cheap, and I don't think it's that bad. After a couple of turns, it's a 4/4 flyer. That's at least up to the rate you paid for it, and it's drawn you a couple of cards. It's not Phyrexian Arena or anything, and it's probably not even the next best thing, but it is an extra card every turn, and it can trigger the turn it comes into play. So I do think there's some like subtly decent things about Lion Vulture. Now next is a card that I'm not necessarily fooled by, but I still think it's pretty cool. It's Aang, Air Nomad, and I think a lot of people will just be happy to see an Aang in the video somewhere. This is 5 mana, 3 and double white for a 5/4 legendary human avatar ally with flying and vigilance, and other creatures you control also have vigilance. So I guess compared to Sarah Angel, it's like way better. You know, it's got an extra point of power. It has the flying and the vigilance, and all your guys get vigilance, which is probably not worth 5 mana. Just a global vigilance on all your dudes. There's other ways of doing it for just a couple of mana. And vigilance isn't like the best ability in the world, but there's like some synergy driven things that you can do if all your guys have vigilance. So just kind of a normal looking, again, like intro packy kind of card, but I wanted an Aang to be in here somewhere, and I don't think that it's bad. That's the thing. Most of the cards that we saw were kind of actively bad. You know, 3 mana 3/2s that don't do anything, 1 mana 2/3 flyers, and well, 1 mana 1/3 flyers. 1 mana 2/3 flyer would be fine. 1 mana 1/3 flyers that don't do anything else. Again, a lot of the cards are kind of actively meh. And at least this one is like, okay, all my guys have vigilance, like you can try to cook. So I respect that about it. Now next is Boomy Eclectic Earthbender over here. He's 5 mana, 3 and double green for a 4/4 legendary human noble ally. And when he enters, you get to Earthbend 1. And whenever he attacks, you get to put 2 +1/+1 counters on each land creature that you control, which is a really interesting ability, even outside of decks that are like dedicated to earthbending or whatever. Now, Avatar's going to give us a lot of ways to earthbend. We've already seen a couple of which are even like next to playable. Anyway, in a deck that makes a lot of its lands into creatures, or a deck that just has a lot of creature lands, like lands that can turn themselves into creatures, then suddenly this becomes like really interesting. You know, you have to wait for it to attack, and it kind of costs a lot of mana. So there are some issues with it even in a deck that can use it, but if it attacks even once, that's a pretty decent ability, and if it attacks 2-3 times, the game's over. So pretty wild card in some ways, and the only reason I really bring it up is because it's a bit narrow in its application, obviously, but it really goes in the deck that it goes in. But now we come to the card that I'm kind of most on the fence about whether it's actually good or not. You know, like I think every card after this is a card that I'm actually really excited about. And I do think there's a chance this is better than every card we've looked at so far. So that's why it is where it is in the video. But I think Bender's Waterskin might actually be like a really good Magic card. It looks pretty simple at first glance. You know, it's 3 mana for a rock. 3 mana of any color, taps for a mana of any color. But here's what sets it apart, right? At the beginning of each other player's untap step, you untap Waterskin. Now we're in a grown-up conversation about a 3 mana rock. So you could actually say this makes 4 mana the turn that you play it, which not a whole lot of other mana rocks do. I can't really think of anyone off the top of my head. You know, if you tap this for a mana the turn it comes into play, it untaps on Susie's turn, you know, untaps on Bobby's turn, untaps on Samantha's turn, and it's just like, this actually could make a lot of mana. You just have to have a way to spend the mana, but I actually don't think that will be super hard most of the time either. You throw it away on activated abilities or something, you pay the 1 for Rhystic Study on every turn. I guess that's the thing you can do with it, but either way, I think a mana rock that untaps every turn is pretty okay. You know, I don't love playing like vanilla 3 mana rocks in my deck, but again, I think in the right deck that has ways of using the mana, you could definitely play this. And it's only a matter of time before this card gets reskinned into the Futurama secret lair. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it probably will eventually. Either way, let's move on to the stuff that I really like. Note that I didn't say the stuff I think is really good. There's a few cards in here that I do think are legit good, but I have to make that differentiation because the first thing we're going to look at in this section is Cat Gator. First of all, I love this card just for its name. I love it for what it is. And even though it is not technically a cat in terms of creature type, I think it might still go in the cat queue. We can discuss that in the comments section. But what does the card actually do? 7 mana, 6 and a black for a 3/2 fish crocodile with lifelink. And when it enters, it casts Corrupt. That's literally what it does. It enters and it deals damage to any target equal to the number of swamps that you control. Crazy. Love it. Love it. It's kind of a cross between Corrupt and like a Gray Merchant of Asphodel, right? And if you have like an Urborg out that makes all your lands into swamps, then suddenly it's a lot of damage. I guess is my point. But you don't even have to have an Urborg. Just in mono black commander decks, this is probably a playable creature. And if you have any way of blinking it, sacking it and then reanimating it, whatever, and just casting Corrupt on a stick over and over, there's a lot more ways of casting Corrupt over and over in black if it's on a body than if it's on, like a sorcerer. And even though I'm not sure this will end up being the same card that Grey Merchant of Asphodel is, I think you could definitely make a case, man. I just think this card is awesome. Awesome. Like, I already love Corrupt enough. It is legit one of my favorite Magic cards. And you put it on a cat gator, yeah, instantly be in love. I don't care if it's in the Avatar set or if it's in the most Magic the Gathering Universes Within set that we've ever seen. Core set 2027. I don't care. I do not care. I love the card. But next, let's take a look at Fire Nation Sentinels, which is probably really, really powerful. 5 mana, 3 and double black for a 4/4 human soldier. And whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Not each other creature, by the way. Just this guy gets the counter too. Absolutely stupid. 5 mana is a lot for this, and it's a little bit intro packy too. I've said that about a few cards in this video, but I guess that's sort of the aim with a lot of these cards. But just because they're kind of intro packy doesn't necessarily mean they're kind of starter decky. Doesn't mean they're bad. Sometimes this kind of simplicity lends itself to a really, really good Magic card. You have swamps in your deck. That means you're playing a lot of removal. And so you can be responsible for blowing away your opponent's creatures and getting counters and all that stuff. You could, but also it just happens. Like Samantha runs into Susie's creatures and a couple of their guys die and suddenly all your dudes get counters. And all of your creatures getting counters is insane. Yeah, I think you guys can get pretty enormous with this. And in like green-black +1/+1 counters decks that have access to effects that like double the number of counters that get put on creatures. And suddenly, like, I don't know how anybody's dealing with your guys, even if you only have 2 or 3 in play. So yeah, again, costs a good bit of mana for what it does, but it does something pretty insane. But actually on that same tip, like Golgari +1/+1 counters, we also saw Long Fang Grand Secretariat. This is 3 mana, 1, and then a couple of Golgari hybrids for a 2/3 legendary human advisor. Look at my phone. Yes, that is correct. The text box is the exciting thing about this. A 3 mana 2/3 is not too great until it does this. Whenever a creature you control or a land you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, a creature you control gets a +1/+1 counter. It may not seem like much, but again, in certain like green-black counters decks, you're getting a bunch of counters. In green-black aristocrats decks, like Dina Soulsteeper is probably a good example, you're getting a lot. In like Gitrog Monster, you're getting a lot because you're sacking lands. There's lots of ways to sack lands. Matter of fact, one of the 2 Edge of Eternity's commanders, the Jund one, wants you to sacrifice lands specifically. So this thing is just throwing around +1/+1 counters. And as long as you have like Crucible of Worlds, Life from the Loam, or other ways of getting lands back from your yard to the table, well, and suddenly this is just making your entire team like really, really big. So it doesn't seem like it does too much, but in just the right deck, I think it could actually do kind of a lot and be worth its slot. I think it might be just worth its slot barely, but if it's doing the work, it's doing the work. I think it's okay. But next, just outside of the top 3, I had to put Flopsy, Boomy's buddy. This is 6 mana, 4 and double green for a 4/4 legendary ape goat. Again, love that you can just mash any 2 creature types together in the Avatar world. I gotta watch Avatar, but again, the text box, the important part of this little dude, this big guy, I guess. When he comes into play, all of your creatures get a +1/+1 counter, including him. So he's actually a 6 mana 5/5. But the truly cool part of this card is that all your dudes with power 4 or greater, again, including this guy, can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. So they can't gang tackle your large dudes and take them down, which is already kind of nice, but it works especially well if you have menace guys. Now those menace guys just can't be blocked. It does in fact work that way. So if you have like a Goblin War Drums, I think that's the name of the card from Fallen Empires. Have to check it in editing, but just any way of giving all your dudes menace and suddenly they're unblockable. So this little Timmy guy, this big Timmy guy, has like a real effect on the table when he comes down. Like all your guys are unblockable and get a little bit larger that turn. Let's go. You don't have to wait for this guy to attack. Gruul probably shouldn't have the problem making the mana to play him in the first place. So again, he looks a little bit like Timmy bait at first glance, but I think this dude might do enough, again, like in the right deck. But we are in the top 3 now, and I want to look at a card that's probably impossible to enable, but I don't care. I think he's really cool. This is Master Paku. I was getting my tongue ready for the Paku, and I hit Master, which isn't a word. But Master Paku is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a 1/3 legendary human advisor ally with prowess. And In this line of text, whenever this guy becomes tapped, target player is going to mill X cards, X being the number of lesson cards in your graveyard. What an interesting design. Really think this guy's awesome, man. Like, first of all, it might be a little bit tough to get a bunch of lessons in your yard because you probably have to cast a bunch of lessons, and most of the lessons we've gotten from Strixhaven and from this set are kind of not amazing. Still, I think that if you could either cast a bunch of them somehow with a bunch of mana or a flurry of ritual effects, or if you can maybe mill a bunch of lessons into your own yard, of course, you can target yourself when this becomes tapped, I believe. So, mill yourself a bunch of cards. That seems like a thing you might do, and then put a bunch more lessons, and the next time he becomes tapped, he can start targeting your opponents. He only can target one player at a time, which is a little dumb, but, with ways of untapping this guy and then tapping him down again, there's plenty of ways to do it. There's like a 3-mana blue aura that you pay a blue mana, you untap the creature that it's attached to. So if you have ways of tapping it down that aren't attacking, like crewing vehicles or tapping to do some other effect like Convoke or maybe water bending from this set, something like that. You have ways, maybe stationing a spacecraft. There's a lot of ways of getting this guy to tap down without actually attacking with it. And there's probably plenty of ways to get him to tap down multiple times in one turn, like an enchantment that says tap target creature you control to do a thing. And you just untap him for 1 blue mana, you tap him again, and the whole time you're milling your opponents a few cards at a time. We're going back to Strixhaven next year sometime. We already know that. There'll probably be more lessons in that set too. So with that in mind, we might actually be able to put this deck together at some point. It might be a little bit of fun, if not super powerful. This card's pretty illustrative of the fact that this is a video that I put together about the cards I think are the coolest and not necessarily the best cards, but again, really cool design on this. And I guess that through line continues with my number 2 card of the day. It's Seismic Tutelage. This costs 4 mana, 3 and a green for an aura that enchants a creature, so better be pretty good. When it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on the enchanted creature, and whenever enchanted creature attacks, double the number of +1/+1 counters on it. I've already used the phrase Timmy bait in this video, so I don't love using it again, but that's probably what this is. Again, I value cool design above a lot of things. I also value simplicity in design, and this has both of those things in droves, man. Pretty simple card to understand. And honestly, pretty powerful card if you can get it rolling. It can have some effect the turn it comes into play, obviously. Not only does it provide the counter, but the creature can just attack the moment that you play this. And then suddenly, it's huge, especially if it already had a few +1/+1 counters on it. Now, out of nowhere, your guy is enormous. And turn over turn, it gets even more dangerous. Imagine this on like a Mossborn Hydra or something like that. Imagine this on a Walking Ballista. Get a bunch of +1/+1 counters and then set the Ballista off. There's a lot of ways to enjoy a card like this. It may cost a little bit much for an aura, and yeah, you might get blown out. There's plenty of reasons why you don't want to play auras, but I feel like every set recently has had 1 or even 2 or 3 really wild auras in it. We saw a few in Edge of Eternities that I really want to play with, and I like that if they're going to design auras, they're going to make them wacky. You know what I mean? Nobody plays these. Let's make really wild auras, and I kind of like that design theory. So again, big fan of this, and I do think there are plenty of ways to leverage it. I don't want to be talking about the card like it's bad because it's going to punch your face in one of these days. But what I think is both my favorite and objectively the best card of the day, seriously, is probably Zuko Avatar Hunter. This is 5 mana, 3 and double red for a 4/5 legendary human noble with reach, and whenever you cast a red spell, any old red spell, you get a 2/2 red soldier guy. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend this is the red Talrand, but I am going to put that idea into your head. At the very least. And Talrand, you gotta cast instants and sorceries and stuff with that guy. Yeah, he makes flyers. Yeah, he costs a mana less. There's a lot of reasons why you probably shouldn't compare him to one of the best creature factories of all time, but he still does make 2/2 dudes whenever you cast anything. Burn spell, which is usually pretty cheap, 2/2. A creature, I cast a creature in red and I get a 2/2. That just seems pretty freaking amazing to me, man. I love this in decks like Black Waltz number 3 and other decks that play a lot of gutter snipe effects and firebrand archers and coruscation mages and all these guys that proc for a damage whenever you cast a non-creature spell. This actually lets you play a card that puts other creatures on the table, which that deck needs to do. I've been playing the 5 mana Judith, I think it's Carnage Connoisseur, to make sure that when I cast spells, I can get 2/2s on the table in order to get bodies. And this is redundant with that, but it's better in a lot of ways because it's just whenever I cast a red spell, which is wild. So, I think this can go in a lot of things. Anything that wants a creature factory, any deck looking to go wide. Red attacks very well, obviously. They have a lot of relentless effects style, or relentless assault style effects that allow them to attack multiple times in a turn. So going wide's good with that. This will make sure that equipment decks like always have a guy to equip equipment to. I guess that's the thing you can do with it. But mostly anything burn oriented or that wants to, storm out. And a lot of stormy decks are red too. Right? So if you're kind of storming and playing like 5-6 spells in a turn, then again, you're just filling the table with guys. And if you can devise a way to give them haste, this becomes like much, much better. So it's not too hard to do in red, obviously. So I just think that there are a lot of angles this card works from, despite the 5 mana cost. But that's it for the giant dump of cards from, Jumpstart and Eternal Avatar. There is one more card I want to mention at least. I guess it's an honorable mention for, I think his name is pronounced Heibai, which is great. That is a great name for a guy, but he's a little Orzhov panda, so I'm going to like him no matter what. But his reflection is some giant shadow monster. That looks really cool. Like more than any other card I've seen from the Jumpstart or from the Avatar stuff period so far. This is the card that like makes me want to watch the show the most. This dude looks so cool, man. But either way, even though this isn't like super playable, I wanted to bring it up because he's awesome. But one way or the other, man, that's all the cards I wanted to bring up for today. Just let me know if I missed anything in that big dump of cards. There's a couple of things that people might be talking about that maybe I didn't bring up. I want to know about those. But also, are these good picks? There's some good stuff in here. I'm pretty convinced. Anyway, guys, just do all the YouTube stuff on the way out. Hit the like button. It's shaped like a thumb. Easy to see down there. The subscribe button. A little bit harder because subscribe is kind of a weird word if you look at it long enough. Subscribe, just subscribe. What does that mean? Scribe like right, sub like below right. What is that? What does that mean? See, if you think about it too long, it becomes very weird. So just hit the subscribe button and move on with your day. It's probably best for your mental health. But apart from that, we have a Patreon. We have one of those, just $1 a month to get involved, and you can vote on what decks and videos we do around here. I'll leave links in the description to pertinent stuff and maybe even another video like the other Avatar video we did if you haven't seen it yet. I'm talking too fast. I am really guzzling this coffee, y'all. I am Dev from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.